everyone, I'm JG and welcome back to MusicForever, where today we're reviewing the new album from Primus, The Desaturating 7. Alright folks, today we're talking about Primus, and what is there really to say about Primus? They're such a weird, kind of eccentric group. They have multiple albums I think are just fantastic under their belt. Of course, they're kind of funk, metal, funk, rock, just strange, out there sound. Is just something that, if you're into weird music like I am, of course you're going to find yourself gravitating towards groups like this. So of course I was looking forward to the release of this new album here, The Desaturating 7. And just kind of looking at this album, without even researching anything concerning the making of this album or what it's supposed to be about, you can kind of tell that it's some sort of concept album of sorts. Of course, there's 7 tracks, of course, kind of the Desaturating 7, there's 7 tracks, all of them beginning with the word "the," and it just kind of seems like there is some sort of running concept throughout this record when you listen to it. And I believe when I was researching the album, I saw that it was based on some children's novel or something along those lines, and, I guess that's cool. It's like an interesting concept, I guess. But the only thing is, at least for me, the biggest problem I have with this album when listening to it is just that it feels a bit light on content. The album itself runs under 35 minutes in length, and I'm not necessarily saying that that's too short for an album, because there's many albums out there that run about this length, if not shorter, that I think manage to have, or rather feel like complete experiences. Yet here with this album, it is a shorter length album for sure, but I still feel like it just runs a bit low on terms of actual content in the project itself, really regardless of the runtime that's presented here. Take for example the last 3 tracks here on the project, which despite the fact that there are only 3 tracks, 2 of these tracks happen to be rather long, over 6 minutes in length, which, considering that the album has 7 tracks, some of these tracks do run a bit longer in terms of their runtime, of course, kind of to reach the 35-ish minutes or so that I was talking about before. And one of the tracks of the last 3 is also a rather short song, under 2 minutes, I believe. But still, despite the fact that these 3 songs, which make up pretty much about half the project, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of the runtime, it's just these 3 tracks don't really feel like they do all that much in the grand scheme of the project. They're not bad songs by any means. I could listen to them. They're fine sounding. But they don't really add much to the project that isn't really established before, and they don't exactly progress Primus's career or even just music in general, as a whole, the genre that they're playing in general, forward in any particular way. They're just there, they're just alright, and that's really it. And while just 3 tracks doesn't seem all that bad when you say it like that, when you realize it is, like I mentioned before, about half the album's runtime, that's kind of like saying half this album you can kind of take or leave, or don't really care about. And those are just the last 3 tracks. The first section of tracks that we get here, really comprising the first half of this album's runtime, I do feel is definitely stronger. Still not super great though, however. I think 2 of the shorter tracks that we get here, The Scheme and The 7, happen to be 2 of the better tracks. These songs are just a bit more concise, to the point, not as long, just, more straightforward funk rock, funk metal type jams that I happen to really enjoy when listening through the album. They're just, pretty fun tracks, to be honest, and that's kind of what I was looking forward to hearing here. And, once again, they don't really feel dragged out or anything of that sort. They just feel like, the runtime is good for what they're trying to do, and they're enjoyable in that regard, which is really all I could have asked for. The longer track that we get here on the first sort of half of the runtime, the track is also pretty good in my opinion. Not quite as good as the previous 2 tracks I mentioned, but I would probably have to say it's my 3rd favorite in the track listing. Despite the fact that it is longer, I do think it has the most substance to it out of the longer tracks that we get here on the project. And overall, I think it's just the more enjoyable out of all these longer tracks here in the track listing as well. And then the opening song here on the album starts off kind of with this spoken word type intro thing that kind of introduces the concept of this album, I guess you could say, before moving into a more traditional type song structure, which I think is fine for the most part. I do like how in the closing track they kind of call back to the sort of sound that's present here on the opening track. I do always appreciate when a concept album, or just really any album in general, manages to kind of tie the whole thing together by having something similar at the beginning and at the end, and just kind of making a coherent sort of project as a whole. And it is one thing I could definitely say about this album as a positive, that it definitely is very much a coherent project, and it is very much it knows what it's trying to do with its concept. Pretty much, it has a definite start point and a definite end point. And as it moves throughout the album, like I kind of alluded to before, you have occasional breaks with some faster, funkier jams, and you have some of these longer, more drawn-out songs as well. Which, you know, like I mentioned before, at the end I think it's a bit too drawn out and a bit too lacking in substance. But like I mentioned, it does occasionally manage to work, like on the track which appears earlier in the track listing, and it does at times, you know, well, really all the time, it never really manages to dip into, like, bad quality, where it's like, I don't want to listen to this anymore. The actual, you know, performances here on this project are, you know, good, I guess you could say. The bass guitar is obviously the best part here, at least in my opinion. You know, Les Claypool, bassist, vocalist for this band, is just one of my favorite bassists, really, ever. So his work here is just great. Everything else is fine, it's sufficient, it's serviceable. Nothing stands out really as being super fantastic, but, you know, it's not terrible either, or even bad either, which I guess is a good thing as well. Really, when it comes to the Desaturating 7, like I said, the concept here is kind of interesting. I like how they are able to kind of execute this concept in a very kind of concise, short amount of time, yet are able to have it still be consistent all the way through. However, I also kind of feel like it just runs very, like, dry in terms of the amount of content that you're getting here. And even though the runtime is, you know, sufficient for an album, I feel like half the album's runtime could have been cut out, and, you know, it would have just been better overall. To be honest, I would have preferred that they cut out, like, the last 3 tracks or so, and then released this as, like, an EP of new material, because, you know, that's what it would have been at that point if you cut out half the runtime. And I think it would have just been more solid and more consistent overall and just less drawn out at the end. Because really that's the only major downside with this album, is that just at the end it starts to drag a bit. And, you know, there's not really all too much new there. But, you know, like I said before, it's not necessarily terrible. It's not something I wouldn't, you know, want to listen to again. I definitely wouldn't mind hearing this again. Not sure I'd be coming back to it all too much in the future, especially given that Primus, I think, have some better albums under their belts that they've released in the past. But, you know, this is an alright project in my opinion. Maybe slightly above average, because some of the songs I mentioned before that I found myself enjoying, like The 7 and The Scheme, were pretty enjoyable, funky tunes, you know? And, you know, that's kind of what I expect from Primus, some weird, funky tunes. So, yeah, I think that's really everything I have to say here concerning this project. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on future album reviews. Comment down below your thoughts on this album. Follow me on all the social medias linked in the description. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay golden.